Hello, everybody. Welcome to Full Throttle Business, the show where we interview entrepreneurs and leaders to uncover what it really takes to build a business operating at full throttle. My name is Kelly Peitz. I'm the owner here at Action Coach Central and Southeast Virginia. And if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to like and subscribe so you can get notifications when we drop new shows just like this one. Today, my guest is Sue Weston. She's the CEO of Upstart Group. Welcome, Sue. So glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So, to set the stage for our viewers,
Mhm.
please give us a brief overview of your background and tell us a little bit about your business.
All right. So my background is all marketing. So marketing starting at Microsoft, back, I always like to say back in the fun years, but really getting to drive a lot of initiatives that were at the time cutting edge and basically being able to work as a part of a team across several roles in the organization. So when we founded Upstart Group, my co-founder and I built the business in 2010. And the intention has always been to take all of these marketing strategies, ways of thinking that we learned at Microsoft and developed at Microsoft, and then applying that to small to mid-sized businesses. Because the reality is, whether it's enterprise or small business, you need the same kinds of strategies. It just needs to be scaled to and applied to their situation or what they can manage to implement and so on. So that's how we started the business. Our function is really that of a marketing executive. So we go in as a fractional marketing team. I'm the fractional CMO for my clients. And then we also have marketing staff, so marketing management, marketing specialists, and so on, that help with not only the developing of some of the strategic elements of a plan, but really managing what we call the get it done parts of marketing. And so that's where our business is focused now. We've been doing this, like I said, since 2010. It's a lot of fun. I love getting to work with CEOs who are really driven and care about their companies and care about their employees and want to grow their companies. That's where I come in.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about the role that you currently play in your business.
I am both the CEO and the business owner, so there's been a lot of learning along the way, as you might imagine, and I sit in both seats. So I both handle some of the business development work in terms of meeting new clients, and a lot of our businesses with key referral partners such as Vistage Chairs, folks like yourself, Kelly, who are really working with CEOs that might need the kind of help that we can provide. So that's a big piece of my job. And the other piece that's been interesting, and I found I actually like this a lot more than I thought, which is the CEO side, which is operational and
Mhm.
managing the people, but also managing and thinking about where does the business need to go? What do we need to do from a budgeting perspective, managing expenses and so on. So really it's soup to nuts at this point,
Mhm.
managing our team to help grow the business and help us stay healthy as a company as well.
Yeah, I mean, business owners, they ultimately wear multiple hats in the business typically,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when
Some
you
that I
look at
never expected to wear, quite frankly.
yeah, and when you look at that role, I mean, how many hours do you spend working in your business, the job, the revenue generating versus on your business, the strategy planning, things like that?
Yep, yep, a lot of it. Some of it, like reading the HR handbook for hours, I could skip that part, honestly, but it's necessary. How's that?
Mhm. Yeah. So let's move into what makes your business special. So who primarily does your business serve? If I was in the audience, how would I know that I'd be a good fit for your services?
That's a great question. So we work with some really small companies. Typically, that's more in a consulting role, helping them figure out what their next steps are. They might not have the budgets yet to invest in marketing tactics. So most people, when you say marketing, they think about social media. Should I do SEO? What are all those components? That's sort of the get it done side of the business. What I tend to think about and where we spend our energy is really, do you have the right market fit for for the products that you're selling? Are you upside down in your messaging? Meaning, is it all about me or is it really all about your customers? And some
Mhm.
of the things that really we know help to drive a business. So we work with some small companies. Most of our clients are 10 million gross annual revenue or above, usually up to about 70, 60, 70 million.
Mhm.
Primary industries for us, technology, obviously with my background, but we also work a lot with manufacturing and distributor companies as well as professional service organizations. Now, we have outliers, but those tend to be kind of the three industry verticals, if you will. And
Okay.
and for me, if it's a CEO or business owner who wants to grow their business, doesn't quite know how, a lot of times we come in at the point where somebody's stuck. Let's say
Mhm.
they've been 20 million and they want to get to 30 million and they just keep floating around that 20 million mark. And I know from doing this for a long time that there is strategic work and typically some foundational work that has to happen. It's not just marketing, it's usually marketing, sales, operations, oftentimes financial planning, financial operations with the CFO. All of those components really come together to get the company or kind of around what we call around the curve to be ready to go up that next growth ramp. So, when a CEO things are moving and they're doing great and their marketing is working, sales is working, they're in good shape. But when that's not working or they don't know what to do next, that's the kind of
Mhm.
clients that we tend to bring in and work with because we know we can help them.
Okay, so what makes your business unique? Why do customers, your clients choose you versus somebody else?
Yeah. It's been an interesting evolution. So when we started fractional, nobody knew what fractional was. It's like, what is that? The fractional CFOs were just on the scene. And really there was only one other company in the space doing fractional chief marketing officers in the way that we are. Now there's a lot of people, especially through COVID, as you might imagine, there's a lot of people that have come into the space. What's different about our company and I think this is important. I think a lot of it is the way that we think. So, marketing is not a siloed and cannot be a siloed function in a company. So, when I'm looking at sitting in the C suite, looking at what are the issues we're trying to solve for, where is it that we need to go strategically in the company? I'm looking at what are the elements across the board. So, it may be sales, it may be marketing, making sure those two are aligned and working really closely is obviously
Right.
important. But there may also be an operational issues, and on operations, oftentimes there is a marketing component, and people don't think of that. But
Mhm.
it's how is this impacting your customers? What's happening here, such that we need to address that, or we need to do some training, or we need to with manufacturing. It could be as simple as we got to clean up the shop floor because we need to be able to bring people through the plant, and you can't do that in its current state. So there's some of that's a simple example, but I think the other piece for us is that we really decided I did not want to just go in, do the strategy, and walk out the door. My driver personally is to really make a difference. And so for us, what's different about the company is we want to come in, be a part of the team, really build the strategies, but then also work to make sure it gets done and to make sure that that plan doesn't just end up in a drawer someplace because there wasn't a leader that had the expertise for being able to make sure that things worked the way they should, that they happened, they evolved, which is what you have to do with marketing along the way. So
Yeah,
I think that's what's primarily different, and that get it done part is where we
yeah.
also have our layered teams that work also with the internal staff that our clients often have. So
Mhm.
it's been a good mix.
Yeah, you mentioned something that really is important in that, the marketing piece isn't just marketing and sales like a lot of people think, and some
Mhm.
companies still have their silos of marketing and sales, and it just doesn't work. They
Oh
got to work
no.
together, right? But the fact that the operations and everything else, it's marketing kind of floats across every aspect of a business
Mhm.
because when you look at, typically the best converting strategy for businesses is referrals, right? And so how do you get referrals? I mean, that's the operations, how they're treating their customer, everything they're doing,
Absolutely.
right? And so if they're
Yeah.
not on point, then they're not going to be getting great referrals. So that was a
Yeah.
great comment there. What's one thing you wish more people knew about your business?
That's a great question, Kelly, in terms of what do I wish people knew. I think some of it is understanding the difference between truly marketing strategy and what we think about. So I do think about the tactics and how do we get things done, and that's what our team helps to manage. But a lot of what I think about are what are the growth levers in a company? How do we look at what's going on in the company? Look at pricing, look at the product offerings, really work with a CFO to make sure we're investing at the right level in the right things so that we're not just spending money. I'm not a big fan of spending money to spend it. And I think that understanding what that executive leadership role from a marketing perspective can do is very important. And I also think that the fractional model, whether it's a CFO, it's a CMO like myself, it's somebody in a fractional HR role, that is such a heavy growth lever for small to mid-sized businesses where the CEO is in the process oftentimes of learning how to not wear that hat, but they
Mhm.
don't yet have somebody on their team or have the budget to hire somebody at the level that they might need. So this is where I think the fractional model is a really valuable opportunity for a lot of business owners to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So this leads me to marketing, which is vital to every business out there, and it's often an area that business owners struggle with, which is what you deal with. So for your business, how many different marketing strategies do you use?
It's interesting. You mentioned earlier about referral partners, and that our business is all referral driven. So for us, a lot of it is I am a big fan of CEO coaching. I'm a big fan of Vistage type groups because one of the things I know is that CEOs just, well, you know this too with what you do, that CEOs get so isolated and they don't realize it and they don't have that outside safety, outside influence where they can really vet things out that they're maybe not able to process in the same way with their internal team. So I think that's a really important piece. And so for me, our own marketing, a lot of it is around those relationships and building those relationships. I'm in a group called Provisors, and that's a national group that is built on people, it's a referral network idea, but it's really built on trust. So it's finding people that you really, they say like, no trust, so that you can
Yeah.
build referrals with a network that you really understand and know. And then for me, a lot of it, the other marketing that we do is really content. So it's hopefully putting forth content that's valuable, that helps somebody learn, that sparks some new ideas. And a lot of that we do both either through our own blogs, but also a lot of it's on LinkedIn.
Okay. So what's your approach? What approach do you take with tracking your leads? I mean, do you have a CRM that you prefer?
All every I do, but every CRM has its pros and cons, and they all have issues, I will tell you that. So for me, it's mostly two drivers. One is right sizing it, so that it actually can meet the company's needs and have the ability to grow with it. The other pieces for me, when we're looking at what CRMs do we need to put in place, is making sure that it can integrate with the systems that the business needs elsewhere. So a lot of times we end up with data silos. We didn't used to see this 6 or 7 years ago. This was never not an issue. Now we're solving this in every single client, because if you have customer data sitting in finance and you've got customer data sitting in ops and you've got customer data sitting over here in sales, and now your customer service person is the one who's interfacing with the customer, but they don't have access to any of this data. So they don't know that they've got an issue on their hands. That's where you start to see things break apart. So for me, it's really looking at capabilities of the technology and what else it has to integrate with. And at the end of the day, marketing and sales particularly need the data that comes out of it. But also from a leadership perspective, we need to be able to use it for effective forecasting. And I think that most of them have some of that capability. Um, and I'll tell you, my favorite is called SharpSpring. Constant Contact bought them several years ago, but I like them because they have an open API, so that we can easily integrate. I just got tired of trying to find data across too many different systems. So
Yeah.
that's one I personally like, but I've worked with all of them. And at the end of the day, frankly, Kelly, if the sales team won't use a CRM because it's too complex or it's from their perspective too much of a pain in the butt, frankly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help us. So we have to make sure that it is built to work within their workflows as well, and not necessarily become an impediment to getting work done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best CRM
It's a
out there is
challenge
not
though,
being
for
used.
sure.
It's no good, right? So,
Yeah.
well, we've spent a bunch of time focusing on the business, sharing some of your best practices for the audience. I'd love to take a step back and dive into your journey a bit more. So, why
Mhm.
did you choose to go into business for yourself as opposing to working for someone else?
I thought a lot about that. And at the time that we were forming Upstart Group, we spent about 4 months, maybe even longer than that, really researching the business model. We had some colleagues out of the tech space that were doing a similar business down in the San Francisco area. We actually went down, spent time with them, helped onboard some clients, really learned their model. But their model was to do the upfront work with startups and then exit. And we just decided that wasn't where we wanted to focus. But for me, I'd been in Microsoft during a heavy growth phase, so had that experience, had the enterprise experience. I'd been with small companies and startups, and I was just really ready to be able to contribute in a different way.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we thought this, let's start this consulting business. And of course, you learn a lot along the way, especially those first couple of years. And I think it has definitely been a journey, learning each part of how to run the business, making that change. Originally, we were a 1099 model, making the change to an employee model and finding out, okay, all the other components that come with managing employees and the things we need to have in place for that. So I feel like we've stepped along the growth path that I think a lot of CEOs end up doing, just in the, this because in the context of running your own business, you have to tackle these problems. Uh,
Yeah. So when you look back on the journey, I mean, you mentioned the 1099 piece as one area, but what challenges did you face early on?
I think that's a great question. Let me think about that just 1 second. So challenges we faced early on, I think, was figuring out for ourselves, what was a good fit client. And so we worked with a really wide variety of clients and learning how to manage that, learning what and where are we going to add the most value and how are we going to get that done? How are we going to work with teams? And then so that just took some learning and it took some experience. And then also finding that we were working with some startups, which I think startups are a lot of fun, but their drivers are very different because they're oftentimes in a pre-revenue. So oftentimes we're really just focused on helping them build out go-to-market strategies, getting their pricing right, getting everything right off the ground, which is really fun. But they're not necessarily in the place where they can invest at marketing to help scale the company. And that's where we shifted more towards working with established companies and helping them to grow. I think the other thing that we learned internally was, especially with my business partner, now she retired about a year ago, April, and is now spending as much time underwater with the fishes as she possibly can, diving all over the place. So I'm very excited for her. But it was a process for us to learn, how do we manage a business together? And how do we divide responsibilities? We had very similar drivers in terms of our whys and making a difference, and we feel really solid about the foundation for the company. But along the way, you have to negotiate, different ideas, different ways of managing. Are we splitting up the responsibilities of the business ownership? And some of that, the behind the scenes, just running the business. Are we splitting those functions up in a way that feels fair and is working for the company? So there's a lot to navigate for that. And for me, it's been another adjustment now, learning how to manage that without a business partner on board. And I feel like that's what a lot of my last year has been, is how do I streamline this? How do I make sure that I can then divide my time to be effective, first and foremost, with customers, and then, secondly, with employees and running the company and so on. So I think there's just been some pivotal points along the way where we've had to learn. What am I greatest, I think this is one of our greatest successes, but some people would call it a failure, is we had a tech company and they were really trying to grow. We did customer research because they were really out of touch with some of what their customer drivers were. And in doing that customer research, we found out they had massive operational issues. And we said, we're going to stop. And we said, we're going to stop marketing, because right now all we're going to do is put a lot more customers into your pipeline that are going to end up being unhappy until you
Mhm.
guys fix these operational delivery issues. So we stepped out of the engagement and we stayed in touch with them, and it was the right thing to do. They spent about a year behind the scenes fixing the operational issues. And, fast forward, once they got that solved, they ended up with a very successful exit for themselves a couple of years later. So I think that was a big learning of, there are times when doing what's right it's more important.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
a
I
great
just
point.
think that's true.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point because within our framework, our foundational framework we call mastery, and within mastery there's four big pieces of mastery:
Yeah.
financial mastery, planning mastery, time mastery, but delivery mastery. If you're not
Mhm.
delivering your product or service properly, you have to master that before you can do before you do anything else.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's really wise.
yeah. So what's been some recent challenges that you're dealing with?
Some recent, it's interesting, and everybody asks every day, what are we doing with AI? What's happening with AI? How's that impacting the business? It's having a very large impact in marketing. Some of it's positive, some of it's not. I bet there's 100 new AI tools a day. coming out. And so, and this has always been a challenge for CMOs is how do you keep up, similar to what you asked about CRMs, how do you keep up with the technology and make sure that what you are using is actually successfully driving the objectives forward? So I think that's part of it. And AI has the potential to be a big disruptor, but also in a very positive way.
Hmm.
We do a lot of, like I said, we're very pro customer research because I know that if we do if I were to research your customers, for example, they'll tell me a whole lot more than they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
And vice versa. If you were to interview my customers, you'd learn a lot more. There's just a safety piece of that for a customer to be able to talk more frankly. But it is a lot of data. And so right now, one of the challenges we've got is how could we and could we effectively use an AI tool to take that interview data, take our research data, and help to aggregate it without it changing any of the meaning and
Hmm.
without it changing any of the context around which we're asking questions or which people are responding to help streamline that process. That's just
Sure.
one example of it. And then we're also learning a lot about how does my team or our vendors that we're working with make sure they're writing prompts that don't expose data, don't expose company secrets, make sure
Hmm.
that, yeah, you have to tell, don't make anything up, right? Is part of it. So I think that's probably been the most interesting challenge. And I see a lot of our CEOs struggling with different aspects of how do we deploy and do we deploy this in a way that's meaningful in our companies?
Yeah. So let's fast forward a bit now and
Yeah.
what comes next. So where do you see the business in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. I would love, I mean, I love what I do. I want to keep doing it. Um, I don't, I don't feel inspired to do something else because I feel like this is a place where I can really make a difference. I want to be able to support my staff, but ultimately I want to be able to grow the company. So what I'd like to see, because there's more work out there than all of the fractional CMOs combined could handle right now in terms of the opportunities with companies. But I'd love to see the company continue to grow with adding. We have contract CMOs that we bring in for certain circumstances, but I'd like to continue adding to that. And then, to support the CMO's effort, then I need a few more staff, whether that's a senior marketing manager, marketing managers, and so on, because that model lets us stay very balanced and also stay very cost effective for customers.
Yeah.
Because there's things where they don't need to pay, an executive rate to have some of these things done. That's really something we want to make sure is right sized to the right skill set. So I'd like to continue to grow that and continue to grow the types of companies that we get to work with. And we're national, so that's, since we've been virtual, we can work any place in the country and continue just to grow those networks and grow those opportunities. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me into goal setting. So what's your approach to goal setting? I mean, how many goals do you set at a time? How do you document them? What's the time frame?
You know, I will tell you honestly, it is one of the things I really struggle with. Now, luckily, I've been in Vistage Group for a long time, and so there's some processes there. But we also have a lot of companies that have worked with the entrepreneur org system, a bunch of different types of goal setting systems. So I typically try to keep to 3 to 5 goals max at any one time. And I might have a yearly goal. We used to be really, let's set 3 or 4 year goals, and things were changing and moving too fast. So what I find works for me best is I'm setting, here's where I'd like to be at the end of the year and have those goals actually targeted. And
Hmm.
then really looking at more the quarterly goals as our checkpoints.
Yeah.
And it's similar to, I'm sure you're similar to traction and those models, but it's that how do we set functional goals as well as aspirational goals?
Hmm.
And then how do I empower the team so that they are able to contribute? And this is the same thing we work on with CEOs. And I'm not a CEO coach, but I think that's where there's really important strategic value in that. So,
Yeah.
but for me, it is one of the things that I tend to want to set these great, big, huge goals. And it's like, that's wonderful. But let's go back to how are we going to get there? And how do we
Right.
make sure that we can achieve those in a way that's healthy for our company, healthy for our team, and so on.
Yeah. So
But
the
I don't
goals are
have a great
important.
answer on that one. You probably have a lot more to say about how do you set those goals effectively.
Well, it's the goals are important to set, and quarterly goals are the way to do it for sure. But then you got to have the strategies in place to achieve the
Yeah,
goals. You got to, develop those strategies of exactly how are you going to achieve those goals. So,
yeah.
um, well, so when you think about the future of business, it's really important to address the topic of building a great team. So how
Yeah.
would you describe your leadership style in business, and has it evolved over time?
I would like to say that I have gotten better at it, hopefully. But I think coming out of uh, I tend to be directive in my style.
Mhm.
And so I have to be careful with that because that can come across as not allowing enough autonomy with my team. So I've been learning and working on that for a long time. And also helping empower, make sure I'm putting it's great to have goals and it's great to say you're responsible for this. But if I don't also give people the authority to make decisions,
Mhm.
then their hands are tied. And it still then comes back to me as a roadblock. And I think this is something um, I think a lot, especially smaller business owners like myself, I think that's a struggle, is that you don't
Yeah.
become a roadblock. You don't try to have your hands on all the decisions. But I also think that getting team members in place where we have really good camaraderie and cross training. My senior marketing manager is fantastic, and our skill sets are very different in terms of I tend to think creative. I tend to think in big blocks out here, and she's much more linear, which makes her phenomenal project manager. So she does a lot of the training with team members, whether that's our team or also internal client staff, in teaching them how to build plans, how to make sure they're managing vendors or projects or whatever that might be. But I hope to keep evolving that. One of the big pieces that we've used that's been really transformational is Colby. I don't know if you're familiar with Colby, but Colby is one of it's like Myers-Briggs or any of the others where it's a personality styles, but it's one of the ones that is based on your natural style
Yeah.
and it doesn't change over time. Some of the other ones that will, as you evolve as a human, they're going to evolve too. And we've been able to really break down and work with Colby as a team to understand, what are the drivers? How does one person, when do they function best during the day even?
Mhm.
Or what are the things where they get motivated? What are the things where they might get stuck? So we need to shore them up, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's been great from a leadership perspective because again, it puts some of the onus on the team, but it also has me not being the one directing. It lets us decide as a team, what do we think would work here? How do we support each other?
Yeah.
So I care a lot about my people, and
Yeah, I mean, as
that
assessments are
matters.
great. I'm so glad
Yeah.
to hear you're using them, and that sounds very similar to what we use and recommend is the DISC assessment,
Yes.
which
Yes.
focuses on the one we use and we've developed with 24/7 assessments is it gives you both your natural style and your adaptive style and
Oh,
DISC.
I love
See
that.
if there's a difference because if there's a big difference in the two, then there's stress in that person because in their adaptive style, they
Yeah.
have to be somebody they're not, and so that's super important. And it's more on behavior and communication, on how people
Yeah.
behave and
Yeah.
communicate. So super important to know that with your all your employees, so that you can best deal with them, best communicate to them.
Well, and do you also use, I'm just curious, do you also use that to help line up job responsibilities?
Absolutely. So, in
Yeah.
our hiring process that we coach our clients, the DISC assessment is part of the hiring process because in every position you need to establish what's the primary DISC that this position needs to have,
Hmm.
and then you hire, you give them the DISC you want to hire to that. Of course, you hire based on culture fit first and foremost, but you want to also ensure that you're not just getting the right people on the bus, but you're getting them into the right seat on the bus
Yeah.
where they can be most
Yeah.
effective. And that's what the DISC
Yeah.
assessment does for
I
us.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Kobe's a little bit different, but we've been trying to use it in a similar way. So
Yeah.
yeah, recognizing that we've got somebody who's very creative and we're asking them to do incredibly detailed slog work.
Right.
That's like this is not a good fit. We need to get that off of their plate and get it to somebody who thrives doing that kind of work. And that,
That's right. Yeah.
those are
Right.
the kinds of insights as we've been talking through this. It's like, oh, well, this isn't let's get you into the things that really help you thrive, but
Yeah.
also help you grow, right?
Absolutely. So important to do that. So, um, what's been your approach to hiring and retaining team members?
Well, when we hire somebody, typically we've done some hiring off of programs like LinkedIn and other places. We have, particularly with CMOs, I have a lot of CMOs that will contact us, which I love, but it's because They love doing the CMO work. They want to do the leadership piece, but they also love the concept of having a team. And
Hmm.
many of them are solar practitioners. They just don't have that in place to help support them and to help as they grow. The other thing they struggle with is the business development side. They don't, it's typical consultants. You've got a lot of some peaks and valleys. So when we get attracted there, really what we're looking at is, like you said, culture fit, but
Hmm.
also very much looking at style with clients and ways of thinking, and what's the background and what do they come out of. And from a more junior staff perspective, oftentimes we've hired based on a referral to someone and just happened to be a right fit, or we've hired new marketing managers, for example. We've got we've got the job description actually, and then we're also looking at, marketing is kind of hard to hire for. This is one of the things we talk to CEOs about, because you can talk to 20 marketing people and they might all sound exactly the same unless you know what the things mean. What is it that they mean by XYZ, and how does that apply? And so being able to dig underneath that, I think, becomes very, very important, um,
Yeah.
for us. And for me and my company, it's also finding somebody that thrives in a variety of things, that they are able to step into, learn new things, take on new responsibilities, and that's part of their personality set, because
Mhm.
that's been really important as we've grown our business.
Yeah. Well, Sue, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in the conversation today. Lots of great nuggets. As we begin to wrap up, I have a few rapid fire questions, kind of quick
Okay.
top of the head answers, okay?
All right, I'll give it a shot.
All right. So first one, what's the key to success for you?
I think the key to my success is staying authentic. It's making sure I'm not getting caught up in what I think others should think or whatnot. It's really staying authentic to what I know and who I am as a human and a person.
Yeah. So what's one piece of advice you'd have for other business owners or somebody that wants to start a business?
Well, I think, to your point earlier, it's making sure you really have a plan as you get started. Where do you want to go? Why are you doing this particularly? And what is it that you want to get out of it? So you have some kind of benchmarking. I think that's very important. And then keeping that in front of you along the way. We value check our values that we created back in 2010. We review them every single year. And we found that they still hold very true for the company, and we use those values as a decision-making mechanism. If something is off, we'll go back to that, and usually we can discover where it is. I think the other thing is, and one of my Vistage coach colleagues out of San Diego says this. He says, do what you can do, and hire people to do everything else.
Mhm.
Because, that's where your expertise is really important, and your ability to drive your company forward is really important. And I can tell you from mistakes we made, we did our own accounting for way too long, and we should not have been doing that. I'm not an accountant, but it's
Mhm.
taking the time to go. I know it's an expense, but the ability to free you up to do the things that are going to make a bigger difference for your company. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because business owners, especially the small to medium-sized business owners, they they're you know if they look at the value that they bring to their company, not what they pay themselves, but the value they bring to their company,
Yeah,
it's usually quite large. And then the work that they're doing, oftentimes minimal, work, minimum wage type work.
right,
They're spending, they're wasting a dollar to save a nickel, when
right,
it comes down to, because you can hire someone to take that off, free your time up so that you can focus on the things that is just going to generate better growth and revenue for your
right,
business.
right.
Um, so the next question is, what's one book that's influenced your thinking?
Oh boy, I have a whole stack of them right now. I think, let's see. That's so hard for me because I like bits and pieces of many books.
Hmm.
But David Baker, I don't know if you're familiar with David. He has a podcast called Two Bobs, and he does a lot of strategy work with companies like ours who are selling professional services. And one of the things that I love his book, because it's both strategic, but it's also very much about business planning,
Hmm.
and how do you structure your business in a way that is effective, can be profitable, and really thinking through some of the hard questions. So I think David's one of my favorite authors. He just published a new one that recently that I haven't read yet. So he's a big influencer right for me right now.
All right, great. So if you had to choose only one area of your business that you could immediately improve, what would it be?
I think for me right now, it's doing exactly what we just talked about, which is, am I getting enough stuff off my plate so that I can focus where I really need to be, which is in client work always comes first, but then also really spending enough time on the business development work so that I am taking that load and helping to drive the company forward, because that's part of where I'm going to add the most value. And then also continuing to get out of my brain what it is that I know, where I do think can add some value, and sharing that like you do with these podcasts. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the final question of the day, how can others learn more about your company? How can they get in contact?
Upstart Group is upstartgroup.com. That we've got information on the website. There's also ways to contact us there. Info@upstartgroup.com is an easy one to reach. And I think those are the two best places to go. The other place is to look at my LinkedIn, which is Sue Weston on LinkedIn. And we have also a company page, but a lot of it lately, like we talked about earlier, I've been trying to do more of the sharing my thoughts and so on LinkedIn.
All right. So,
Yeah.
last question of the day. What inspires you most these days?
What inspires me most? I think this is stay consistent, whether it's business or it's personal. It really matters to me to see and be able to help in some fashion other people succeed, and whatever that looks like for them. A CEO is going to grow their business and succeed in whatever their definition of that is, not mine. And so understanding that, being able to help grow, the same thing holds true for me, whether that's my kids, my friends, my family. What are their dreams, and how can I be a part of helping them come true in some way? How can I support them on their journey? That's one of my big inspiration points. I think people are
Great.
amazing.
Those are great closing words, Sue. So thanks for much so much for taking time with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on, and it's been a lot of fun.
All right. So that wraps up this episode of Full Throttle Business. Hey, if you're a business owner who wants to grow your company, increase your profits, and get your time back, visit the link in the description and schedule a free strategy session with me.